everyone and welcome back to day 25 of our F125 Hotlap and Setup series. Yesterday we returned here with the reverse Austrian Grand Prix. Now I must admit, heading into this one I was really excited to kind of see what this track is like, you know, properly try and work out the ins and outs of one of these reverse tracks. And honestly, by the end of this, I don't particularly like this place the wrong way round. The main issue I find is just the curbs here. Now, I understand obviously EA have literally just flipped the track around, like there's nothing else they've kind of tweaked and changed in regards to the actual circuit itself. But obviously now, a lot of the entry curbs are really bumpy, and a lot of the exit curbs are quite kind of flat and nice, which is kind of the opposite to obviously what normally happens and what works with a Formula 1 circuit. So trying to get the lap hooked up here has been quite awkward, to be honest. There's quite a lot of little nuance and things like that you've really got to learn to try and maximise the lap time around this venue. Of course, if you don't know what this series is about, I basically go in, I show you a race-ready setup inside F125. I talk you through the circuit, where your braking markers should be, what you want to be looking for, and then last but not least, I leave you with a hot lap. Of course, all of these setups, as always, are provided for free. You know, I try and use the YouTube revenue to kind of justify it. So please, if you aren't already, make sure you get yourself subscribed if you find these useful. We're trying to hit 15k subs here on the channel at the moment then. As always, timestamps will be linked down below as well. And yeah, let's get into our track guide. Making our way then through the final corner, or what is normally the first corner here in Spielberg, getting the car all the way up into 8th gear. As you make your way down towards turn 1, you want to hug the right-hand side of the circuit. Now, turn 1 and 2, I must admit, are quite fun, but a little bit awkward as well. Mainly, obviously, because you're already trying to rotate the car into turn 1 and get it slowed down. So you want to be braking at about the 50-meter board, bring the car down from 8th gear all the way into 5th. Try to attack the apex curb there, but avoid the sausage curb on the inside. You'll actually notice, if I go back slightly, there's kind of a little bit of a step on that curb as well there. You just see, obviously, you've got the normal curb and then kind of a step up on to the rest of it there. So I would just avoid that entire step if you can get away with it there. It's very high speed though into turn 1, so I understand it is quite difficult to try and get the car planted exactly where you need it. 5th gear, like I said, on the exit, try to get the car wedged over this outside curbing off of the corner. Again, you want to try and get the car this time around over the step. Turn 2 is completely flat out. Just avoid that curb on the inside, otherwise it will upset the rear of the car as well there, and try to be nice and smooth on the steering to carry the speed out on the exit there. Try to avoid using too much curb on the exit because it very quickly turns to grass, and that's not ideal. And then we're going to be all the way up in 7th gear as we make our way in towards turn 3 and turn 4. Really tricky here. It's kind of now a blind apex through turn 3, but you want to try and get the car completely wedged over the curbing as best as you can. Just as you get to this second yellow kind of group of curbs, bring the car down into 5th gear there, avoid the curb on the inside, get on the throttle pretty much as the curb ends, and then again you want to be wedging the car over the curb as we make our way up the hill then. Up in 6th gear, just down the 1 to try and keep the front end rotated in. Use that curbing on the inside, try and keep the car nice and tidy through, and then once again you're getting on the throttle nice and early. You can use that exit curb a little bit if you need to. It's normally a good sign that you've got on the throttle early enough as well. 6th gear then, and this has got to be easily, I find, one of the trickiest corners to try and get hooked up. You're going to use the 100-meter board as your braking reference, but do not use the curb on the outside. Try and get the car rotated in nice and tidy, all the way down to 2nd gear. The car naturally wants to understeer away from the apex, so try and get it in as best as you can, and get on the throttle nice and early on the exit. Leave it in 2nd until you need to shift up to 3rd, otherwise you'll cost yourself speed all the way up the hill in towards the final couple of corners. Both of these two really tricky as well. You're going to be all the way up in 8th gear by the time you get up towards the top of the hill and the highest point of the lap. I like to brake at about 110 meters out just before the start of the curbing. Bring the car all the way down. Try to use the outside curb as best as you can, but it is very bumpy. If you're really struggling with it, I would just say the best thing to do is then just avoid it. But then trying to nail the apex here as well can be really awkward. Do not hit that sausage curb, it'll just upset the balance of the car, and then try and get on the throttle nice and early on the exit. Again, being careful of kind of that jagged curbing on the outside, get the car wedged over it like I've done here, Open up the DRS as you make your way down the hill. Keep the car with the 2 wheels over the white line, just to give yourself the slightly shorter run, and then down in towards the final corner. You're going to be all the way up in 8th gear once again. You want to be looking for the 100-meter board. It's really, really odd. You've kind of got to outbrake yourself in towards this final corner, all the way down into 3rd gear though. Again, avoid the sausage curb on the inside, nice and early on the throttle on the exit. Once more, getting the car over the curbing. It's a really, really awkward track now, because Austria normally, a lot of the corners kind of open up on exit. Now they kind of tighten up on exit, which is very, very awkward and tricky to try and get a lap hooked up. It is still, though, a very, very short circuit inside F125. It is good fun when you do get it nailed around here, but it's just, you know, especially where I've never driven these tracks backwards, it is really, really kind of weird to learn because they are a completely different circuit inside this game. Anyway, let's head though back to the pit lane and I'll talk you guys through the setup. Well, having a look then at our global leaderboard, as you can see, about a second away from some top times here. There's some very, very sweaty laps being put in already. Thomas Ronhaar on a 103.4. I can't quite remember where that compares to kind of the normal lap time, so I think it's a few tenths slower, but there really isn't a lot in it either around this circuit. Taking a look though at our current setup, you can see 2014 wing, actually one of the more aggressive setups I've used in terms of wing angle difference inside this game. You just need a lot of bite from the front end, but of course there are still, you know, quite a few high-speed sections on this venue as well. A lot of the corners now feel slower because obviously they tighten up on exit, so you kind of are obviously getting on that throttle a little bit earlier, but obviously having to scrub off a bit more speed on entry. 80 diff and 25 off-throttle differential there. Fairly standard to what we've ran inside this game. Again, though, it's just about trying to get the power down nicely. A lot of very, very awkward traction zones, especially with those curbs. You want the on-throttle diff to be quite locked so the wheels can't spin too much independently. But, of course, obviously, then you do run the risk of just getting wheel spin and you're in a wall somewhere, which is not ideal in a race there. My standard camber angle and toe settings as well, they're just what I run inside this game. I feel like I say that far too often at the moment. 28.8 though for the front and rear suspension. That is actually a lot more kind of neutral than we normally see inside this game. Often we're running firmer front suspension and softer rear suspension, but around here it's, yeah, a little bit tricky, a little bit awkward, and then very, very firm anti-roll bars on the front and rear there. 13-17. I would even up this to like 14-18 if you're still really, really struggling. Quite low ride heights though. It is a really awkward track for that because obviously a lot of the entry curbs now are a little bit awkward, but a lot of the exit curbs are really, really tough. You want to keep the car as low to the ground as you can because it gives you a bit more rotation. It allows the front to bite as those corners tighten up on exit as well there. So 21.48. Again, if you're really struggling with the curbs, I would up this to like 26.50. But obviously the lower you run, the ever so slightly quicker you'll be. You just might be less consistent. 54.97 for my brake pressure and bias as well. Fairly standard inside this game. I would run ever so slightly less brake pressure than what you normally do, just because it's very, very easy to lock up over those curbs you're trying to brake on around this lap. And then last but not least, 29.5 front PSIs, 25.5 on the rears. Again, this circuit can be quite awkward for tyre temperature management inside F125. It will still be a one-stop, exactly the same strategy as what we run the other way around. In fact, here now, you want to be really, really careful. The pit lane entry now is terrible inside this game as well, so got to be really, really careful with that one. Hopefully this video helps you out, though. If it does, like I said in the intro, please do make sure you drop us a sub. It is the best way to support us with all, obviously, the free work we're doing. But yeah, that's going to do us for this one, and we'll be back very soon, ready at Silverstone.